The USS Indianapolis was born from steel, sweat, and purpose laid down at the Camden shipyard in New Jersey. She was built during the fevered years between wars, a time when America still believed in peace, but was already preparing for the storm to come. Commissioned in 1932, the heavy cruiser was sleek, powerful, and fast, capable of cutting through the Pacific at 32 knots. She was a ship of elegance and might, her crew proud to serve aboard what many called the Indy. By 1945, Indianapolis had seen nearly everything the Pacific War could offer. She had fought at Kwajalein, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Her guns had thundered against Japanese fortifications, her decks had trembled beneath kamikaze strikes, but through it all, she endured, a symbol of resilience in the vast ocean war. At her helm stood Captain Charles Butler McVay III, a man of composure and quiet strength. The crew respected him. He wasn't the kind of officer who barked orders, he spoke with purpose. When he walked the deck, sailors straightened their backs not out of fear, but pride. July 1945, the secret mission. The war was nearly over, though no one aboard knew it yet. Japan was on the verge of collapse, its cities burning under waves of American bombers. Yet in the midst of this chaos, Indianapolis was given a mission shrouded in secrecy. On July 16, at the Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California, she was loaded with a strange cargo, 2 large wooden crates, heavily guarded. The documents simply read, "Top secret. For delivery to Tinian Island." Only a handful of officers knew the truth. Inside those crates lay components of the most powerful weapon ever created, the atomic bomb. Little boy Captain McVay was handed sealed orders and told not to open them until the ship was at sea. He didn't ask questions. Duty was duty. As Indianapolis left the harbor and headed west, the sun dipped low over the Pacific horizon. The crew gathered on deck, the warm wind carrying laughter and music from a small radio. After years of war, the men dreamed of going home, to families, to peace, to normal life. They didn't know they were sailing into history. The delivery, July 26, 1945. The Indianapolis reached Tinian Island in the Marianas. In the early dawn, her mysterious cargo was unloaded by waiting officers and scientists. Within days, those components would be assembled into the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Mission accomplished. The crew had no idea what they had just delivered. They only knew they had completed their orders flawlessly, one of the fastest runs across the Pacific on record. At Tinian, McVay received new instructions: sail to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines to join preparations for the invasion of Japan. The war, it seemed, was nearing its end. The men relaxed, some even joked that maybe they'd finally make it home before Christmas. Into the open sea. On the evening of July 28, Indianapolis departed Tinian and headed into the Philippine Sea. The sky was clear, the water calm, deceptively calm. The cruiser cut through the night at a steady 17 knots, her navigation lights dimmed, her radar scanning the dark waves for any sign of the enemy. Unbeknownst to her, lurking beneath those same waters was I-58, a Japanese submarine commanded by Lieutenant Commander Makitsura Hashimoto. For Hashimoto, the war was lost, but not over. His orders were to attack any American ship he could find. His crew had endured hunger, exhaustion, and hopelessness, but that night, fate would place them directly in the path of the Indianapolis night watch. It was just after midnight on July 30, 1945. The night was black, moonless, the sea smooth as glass. A warm wind carried the scent of salt and oil. On the bridge, Captain McVay leaned on the rail, speaking quietly with his officer of the deck. McVay, we've made good time. If this weather holds, we'll see Leyte by Tuesday. Officer, yes, sir. Feels almost peaceful out here. McVay, too peaceful. The ocean's always hiding something. He paused, glancing out at the dark expanse. The ship's wake glowed faintly in the phosphorescent water below deck. Sailors slept in their bunks, others played cards or wrote letters home. The radio played softly in the mess hall, a Glenn Miller tune drifting through the corridors. Somewhere below that calm surface, Hashimoto's periscope broke through the waves. Through the lens, he saw the outline of a large cruiser, silhouetted against the stars. Hashimoto, quietly, in Japanese, target identified. Bearing 320 degrees. Range, 1,500 meters. Prepare torpedoes. He raised his hand, his voice low and firm. Fire 1, Fire 2, Fire 3, Fire 4. The attack at 014, the first torpedo struck Indianapolis on her starboard bow. The explosion tore open the hull, sending a column of fire and steel high into the night. Seconds later, another torpedo hit amidships, ripping through the fuel tanks. Flames erupted instantly, racing across the decks. Men were thrown from their bunks, others engulfed in burning oil. Sailor, shouting, "We've been hit. Torpedo strike, starboard side." The ship began to list heavily to port. Within minutes, the engine rooms were flooding. The electricity failed, lights went out, replaced by screams and chaos. Captain McVeigh raced to the bridge. McVeigh, damage report. Officer, 2 torpedoes confirmed. Fire in the forward compartments. We're taking water fast. McVeigh, sound the abandoned ship. Get the men topside. He could already feel the deck tilting under his feet. Below, trapped sailors pounded on hatches as the ship filled with seawater. Others leaped into the flaming ocean, their uniforms igniting in the oil-slicked waves. Sailor, she's going down. Jump. Jump. At 019, just 12 minutes after the first strike, the USS Indianapolis began her final descent. Her bow rose high, her stern swallowed by black water. Men clung to debris, lifeboats, and one another as the ship disappeared beneath the surface, taking 300 sailors down with her. The rest, nearly 900, were left adrift in the vast, dark sea. Silence, and then silence, the kind of silence that only the ocean knows. The flames faded, the debris drifted, and the survivors floated under a canopy of stars. No one knew where they were. No distress call had been received. No one was coming. McVeigh, to himself, quietly, God help us. The Black Sea stretched endlessly around them. It was the beginning of one of the most horrifying ordeals in naval history. Part 2, 4 days in hell. The USS Indianapolis was gone. The vast Black Sea swallowed her whole, leaving behind a graveyard of twisted metal, oil, and nearly 1,000 men clinging to life. The night sky above was eerily calm. The stars shimmered coldly, indifferent to the suffering below. The air smelled of burning oil and blood. Men floated together in small clusters, some with life jackets, others clinging to rafts or debris. Many were burned, bleeding, or stunned into silence. The cries for help echoed into the emptiness. Over here. Help us. Hold on to the raft. Don't drift away. Where's the ship? My God, where's the ship? There was no answer. No flares. No rescue, only the slow sound of waves against bodies and debris. Captain Charles McVeigh, soaked and dazed, clung to a piece of floating wreckage. Around him were dozens of his men, eyes wide, faces ghostly pale under the starlight. McVeigh, hoarse, stay together, men. We'll form groups, smaller ones, will be found soon. Sailor, sir, did anyone get the distress out? McVeigh, I don't know. He didn't know that no message had reached command. The Indianapolis had vanished, and no one on land even knew she was missing. The first dawn, when the sun rose on July 30th, it revealed the full horror of their situation. Hundreds of men bobbed in the ocean, scattered across miles of open water. Some clung to rafts, others floated in groups, linked arm to arm to keep from drifting apart. The tropical sun beat down mercilessly. Within hours, lips cracked and skin blistered. The salt water burned open wounds. They had almost no food, almost no water. No signal flares. No radio, and worst of all, they were in shark-infested waters. At first, the sharks kept their distance, circling lazily beneath the floating men. But as the day grew hotter and the smell of blood spread, they began to move closer. Sailor, whispering, "Sir, they're down there. I can see their fins." McVeigh, don't thrash. Don't panic. They're curious, that's all. But he knew the truth. The Pacific was alive beneath them, hundreds of sharks drawn by the sound, the scent, the chaos, thirst and madness. By the second day, the sun had become their greatest enemy. The men prayed for clouds, for rain, anything to cool the burning heat. But the sky stayed blue and merciless. The salt water glistened around them, tempting, shimmering, but it was poison. Those who drank it quickly went mad. Sailor, it's water. It's right there. I can't take it anymore. Others, no. Don't. It'll kill you. But desperation won. Men cupped seawater into their mouths, gulping it down, and within hours, they began hallucinating. Some thought they saw islands on the horizon and swam toward them, disappearing forever. Others claimed to see Indianapolis still floating, and tried to climb aboard invisible decks. By the end of the second day, delirium set in. McVeigh, to his officer, we have to keep them together. The sharks are taking the ones who drift off. Officer, yes, sir, but there are fewer of us every hour. The sharks come on the morning of July 31st. The sharks attacked in force. It began with a scream, high, sharp, then abruptly cut off. Then another. And another. They got him. Jesus Christ, they're taking him under. The water churned red as fins sliced through the waves. The predators, mostly oceanic white tips, struck quickly and silently, pulling men down before anyone could react. Survivors tried to fight them off, kicking, punching, stabbing with bits of metal or wood. But the sharks kept coming. Sailor, stay close. They go for the ones alone. Another, don't let them see your blood. McVeigh floated among his men, trying to hold them together, but even he could see the fear spreading like wildfire. Every ripple in the water, every touch from another man's leg sent waves of panic. By nightfall, hundreds were gone. Some had been dragged down by sharks, some had succumbed to thirst or madness, some had simply given up, letting the ocean take them. The second night darkness fell again, and the survivors huddled together, whispering prayers into the void. The ocean was a black, endless mirror. Occasionally, a man would cry out, a sudden scream, followed by silence. No one dared ask who it was anymore. Sailor, whispering, Captain, are we going to die out here? McVeigh, no. Someone will come. Just hold on a little longer. But in his heart, he wasn't sure. No one knew they were missing. Their route hadn't been reported. The sea was vast, and they were just a handful of souls drifting in the middle of nowhere. Still, he refused to surrender. McVeigh, quietly, to himself, as long as one man breathes, we haven't lost. Hallucinations. By the third day, reality began to unravel. Men spoke to ghosts, to loved ones, to God. Some sang hymns, their voices trembling in the heat. Others turned violent, convinced their comrades were hoarding water or food. Fights broke out. Men clawed at one another over floating rations that didn't exist. A few drifted away silently, staring into the horizon, whispering about rescue ships that weren't there. Sailor, they're coming, I see them. Big white ships, the Navy's here. Others, where? Sailor, right there, right. He slipped under the waves and never came back up. McVeigh's body ached, his lips cracked and bleeding. His uniform was in tatters, soaked with oil and salt. Still, he moved among the groups, checking on whoever was still alive. McVeigh, keep your strength. Don't drink the water. Stay together. Sailor, weakly smiling, Captain, we'll make it. But the man's eyes were already empty. The fourth day, Hope August 2 ND. 4 days since the sinking, the sun blazed down again, unrelenting. The men floated half dead, their skin burned raw, their eyes hollow. Out of nearly 900 who went into the water, only a few hundred still clung to life. Then, a miracle, high above, in the late morning sky, a PV-1 Ventura bomber was flying routine patrol. The pilot, Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn, looked down and saw a strange sight, a dark oil slick stretching across the sea, and tiny specks moving within it. He blinked, leaned forward, and realized what he was seeing. Gwynn, into radio, this is Ventura 2. I've got men in the water. Repeat, men in the water. Looks like survivors, a lot of them. Down below, the survivors saw the plane and began waving frantically, ripping off shirts, flashing mirrors, anything they could. Sailor, they see us. They see us. McVeigh, hoarse whisper, thank God. The plane circled again, dropping a life raft and radio beacon before speeding off to call for help. For the first time in 4 days, the men had hoped. Rescue that night, the first rescue ships arrived, the destroyer Cecil J. Doyle among them. As searchlights swept across the ocean, they illuminated a nightmare, bodies everywhere, oil and blood staining the waves, survivors too weak to swim calling out faintly in the dark, rescuer, over here. Pull them in. Get lines over the side. Sailor, crying, we're saved. By dawn, more ships joined in. For 24 hours, rescue teams pulled survivors from the sea, some barely alive, others delirious, babbling prayers and nonsense. Of the 1,196 men who had sailed aboard USS Indianapolis, only 316 survived. Aftermath. When Captain McVeigh stepped onto the deck of the rescue ship, he could barely stand. He looked back toward the horizon, where the sun rose over the same waters that had taken nearly 900 of his men. He didn't speak. He simply whispered a name, his ship's name. McVeigh, Indianapolis. He would spend the rest of his life haunted by that name. Part 3, The Court of Shadows. The survivors of the Indianapolis were brought back to land in silence. There were no cheers, no triumphs, only exhaustion, grief, and disbelief. Many were so weak they couldn't walk. Others lay in hospital beds, eyes open but minds lost somewhere over that dark ocean. The Navy, embarrassed by the disaster, immediately began an investigation. How could one of its most powerful cruisers vanish without anyone noticing for 4 days? How could nearly 900 men be left to die in the open sea? And amid all the confusion, the name that began to circulate was Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III. Returned to land. When McVeigh stepped ashore at Guam, he was greeted not with honor, but with silence. Reporters waited. Officers looked away. He had survived what should have been his death, but now, he was about to face something worse. In the days that followed, the survivors were interrogated. Some defended their captain fiercely, others, still traumatized, could barely remember what had happened. The official report confirmed the horrifying numbers. Out of 1,196 men, only 316 survived, and yet, the question that echoed through Washington was simple: who was to blame? A scapegoat. The Navy needed an answer. Public outrage was building, newspapers demanded explanations, and politicians called it an unthinkable failure. Rather than admit to systemic miscommunication, lost messages, poor reporting, negligence, the Navy turned its gaze toward one man, Captain McVeigh. They charged him with failure to zigzag, the evasive maneuver meant to confuse enemy submarines. The implication was that his ship had been an easy target because he had not ordered a zigzag course at the right time. McVeigh was stunned. McVeigh, they're blaming me. For what? For following orders. Officer, sir, they say if you had zigzagged, the torpedoes might have missed. McVeigh, might. We were sailing under orders to proceed at discretion. I did exactly that. But the decision had been made. Someone had to take the fall. The trial in December 1945, only months after the war had ended, McVeigh stood before a court-martial. He wore his uniform, pressed, neat, dignified, but his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a man carrying hundreds of ghosts on his back. The courtroom was filled with officers, reporters, and silent witnesses. Even some of the Indianapolis survivors were there, sitting in rows, watching their captain stand trial for the deaths of their friends. The prosecution argued that McVeigh had failed to properly protect his ship. They claimed his negligence had cost hundreds of lives. To make their point, they called an unusual witness, Lieutenant Commander Makitsura Hashimoto, the Japanese submarine captain who had sunk the Indianapolis. It was a surreal moment. The American captain and his enemy, standing in the same courtroom. The enemy's testimony: Hashimoto, wearing his Japanese uniform, was calm and respectful. He had survived the war, and he answered every question carefully. Prosecutor, Commander Hashimoto, if the Indianapolis had been zigzagging, would you have missed your target? Hashimoto, no, sir. It would have made no difference. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the Japanese commander confirmed that the zigzag pattern would not have saved the ship. He had fired from perfect position, at close range, under ideal conditions. Still, the Navy pressed on. They needed a conviction. The weight of public anger was greater than the weight of truth. McVeigh, quietly, to his lawyer: even the men who sank us says it wouldn't have mattered. What else do they want? Lawyer, a name, captain. They want a name to blame. Verdict: on December 19, 1945, the court found McVeigh guilty of hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. He was sentenced to a formal reprimand and loss of seniority. The Navy tried to balance justice. They didn't imprison him, but the damage was done. The press labeled him the men who killed his crew. Letters poured in, some from grieving families, others from angry citizens calling him a murderer. The survivors were torn apart emotionally. Many loved their captain and defended him. Others, unable to process their trauma, echoed the accusations they had heard. McVeigh carried the weight of all of it. McVeigh, reading a letter aloud, my son trusted you. He died out there because you failed him. Pause, they don't know, they'll never know. A life in shadows. In the years that followed, McVeigh tried to live quietly. He was reinstated to duty, promoted to Rear Admiral on the retired list, and eventually left the Navy, but he could never escape the ghosts of the Indianapolis. Every night, he dreamed of the screams, the sharks, the faces of the men he couldn't save. Every morning, he woke up to new letters, reminders of the burden that never left him. He lived alone in his house in Litchfield, Connecticut, surrounded by mementos of his service, photos of ships, medals, and the framed image of the Indianapolis, shining and proud before her final voyage. But to him, those photos were no longer symbols of glory. They were tombstones. The survivors fight over the decades. The survivors never stopped fighting for him. They wrote petitions, spoke to Congress, and demanded that the Navy clear McVeigh's name. They knew he wasn't to blame, that the real failure had been the system that lost their ship in the first place. In interviews, men who had endured sharks and thirst still spoke of their captain with respect. Survivor, he was one of us. He didn't abandon us. They made him the scapegoat because they couldn't face their own mistakes. But time moved on, and the world forgot. December 1968. It was a cold, quiet morning in Litchfield. The world had changed. Vietnam was raging. The atomic age was in full swing. But inside one small New England home, the war had never ended. Captain Charles McVeigh, now 70, walked into his garden. He was dressed neatly, as always, navy blue slacks, white shirt, cap under his arm. He carried a small revolver and his dog followed him, tail wagging. He stopped beneath a tree, looked toward the horizon, and whispered something only the wind heard. Then, he took his own life. When the police found him, his dog was still lying beside him, waiting. In his hand was a small toy sailor, a gift from one of the survivors years earlier. Legacy for decades, his name remained tainted, a mark of controversy in naval history. But the men who had lived through those terrible days never stopped speaking for him. Finally, in 2000, after more than half a century, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution exonerating Captain Charles McVeigh. President Bill Clinton signed it into law. His record was clear. It had taken 55 years for the truth to prevail. The next reunion of Indianapolis survivors. An empty chair was left for McVeigh. One of the men raised a glass and said quietly, "Captain, you were never alone. We knew it all along." The others nodded, some wiping their eyes. Outside, the sea roared faintly in the distance, eternal, indifferent, and yet somehow still listening. Part 4. Echoes of the Deep. The sea kept its secret for more than 70 years. For decades, the location of the USS Indianapolis remained unknown, a mystery lost somewhere in the vast, silent Pacific. The survivors aged, their numbers dwindling with each passing year. They would meet at reunions, gray-haired men in Navy caps, sitting in quiet circles, telling the same stories they had told 1,000 times before, because to forget was to lose their brothers all over again. Each year, they raised a glass to the ship that had carried them through war and into legend. Each year, fewer glasses were raised, ghosts beneath the waves. In the early 21st century, technology finally caught up with memory. Deep-sea explorers began mapping the seafloor with high-resolution sonar, searching for lost relics of the Second World War. Among the ships they dreamed of finding, one name stood out, Indianapolis. In August 2017, a private research vessel named Petrel, funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, began a mission in the Philippine Sea. Using historical records, naval archives, and newly declassified data, the team plotted the coordinates of the submarine I-58's attack. On the morning of August 19, 2017, as their sonar swept the seafloor 3.5 miles beneath the waves, the screens lit up with unmistakable shapes: a hull, torn but still proud; a turret, silent and heavy; the outline of letters barely visible under a skin of coral and rust. Technician, softly, we've got her. Team leader, confirm identification. Voice over the comms, this is her. It's the Indianapolis. There was silence in the control room, not the excitement of discovery, but a deep, reverent quiet. They had found the final resting place of 879 men. The descent remote cameras descended into the dark. The lights pierced a world untouched since 1945. A graveyard frozen in time. There lay the bow, half buried in silt. There, a gun mount still pointed upward, as if ready to fire. A nameplate, barely legible through the rust, read simply, Indianapolis. The footage was transmitted live to Navy Historians and, later, to surviving crewmen and their families. When the images appeared on the screen, the room went silent. Survivor, voice trembling, she's still standing proud, even down there. For them, the discovery was more than closure, it was reunion. They had lived their lives haunted by memory. Now, they could finally speak of the ship not as a tragedy, but as something real again, found and honored. Memory and reconciliation. After the discovery, the Navy issued a new statement, not of apology, but of recognition. They acknowledged the courage of every man aboard, and they repeated, formally and without condition, that Captain Charles McVay III bore no blame for the loss of his ship. At the next survivors gathering, fewer than 20 men were still alive. They stood together in front of a framed photograph of the Indianapolis, their eyes shining in the dim light of a hotel ballroom. Survivor 1, they found her, boys. Our ship. Survivor 2, about damn time. Laughter, then silence. Another, quietly, Captain knows. He's with her now. For a moment, it felt as if the war had finally ended. The depths remember far below, in eternal darkness, the Indianapolis rests. The ocean floor around her is calm, undisturbed, a monument sculpted by pressure and time. Fish drift through her empty corridors, corals grow where men once stood watch. The silence there is absolute, yet to those who know her story, that silence speaks louder than cannon fire. It tells of duty carried out to the very end. Of sailors who fought to live when all hope was gone. Of a captain who bore a nation's guilt, and whose name was finally cleared, and of the strange, solemn peace that only the sea can give to those it takes. Legacy. Today, school children learn the story of the Indianapolis not as a footnote, but as a lesson, about courage, failure, responsibility, and redemption. Documentaries recount her final voyage. The Navy honors her crew at memorials across the country. In Indianapolis, Indiana, and at Pearl Harbor, where their names are engraved in bronze. The survivors' voices have faded, but their words remain recorded, a living echo. Voice of a survivor. Interview, 1990s. People ask me how I survived. I tell them, I didn't. Not all of me. The part that stayed alive is the part that remembers, and that part, it'll never die. Epilogue. On calm days, the sea above the wreck is impossibly blue. The waves roll softly, as if guarding the silence below. If one could dive down those 3.5 miles, through the black water and crushing pressure, they would see the Indianapolis still there, proud, defiant, whole in spirit. Her decks are empty, her guns silent, but her story endures, carried by the generations who learned what her men endured, and what their sacrifice meant. And somewhere, in that endless dark, perhaps, the captain walks his ship once more, checking the lines, watching over his crew, making one last patrol through the memory of the world. We are still with you, Captain, the sea might whisper. Rest easy. Your watch is over.